Coming up on the Angus Report, skeletal correctness begins with feet and legs. Angus Genetics Incorporated is excited to announce it's one step closer to creating a foot-scoring EPD.
It's an opportunity to evaluate Angus cattle for structural soundness and is a useful tool in terms of identifying AI sires that will improve foot structure in Angus cattle.
We talk with a tax expert about the recent tax reform that's already impacting farmers and ranchers.
Is your herd getting proper mineral nutrition? We share tips to effectively manage range cattle nutrients.
This is the Angus Report.
Hello and welcome to the Angus Report. I'm Bob Cervera.
And I'm Clint Mefford.
Our top news this week. Feet and legs are the foundation of every herd. Breeders know that and brought the issue to Angus Genetics Incorporated. In 2015, AGI began collecting data points on feet and legs, and today, 12,000 data points have been collected and analyzed. AGI has released a research EPD for feet and legs. We caught up with AGI President Dan Mosier to learn more about what the new FootScore research EPDs are and what comes next.
Recently, Angus Genetics Incorporated announced the release of FootScore EPDs, a first for the U.S. beef industry. FootScore EPDs were calculated from about 12,000 records submitted by Angus breeders all over the United States. It's an opportunity to evaluate Angus cattle for structural soundness and is a useful tool in terms of identifying AI sires that will improve foot structure in Angus cattle. A research EPD is a first run. We are very much in research mode with this. It's not final in terms of how we'll analyze the data as we hear feedback from our members. So it's just a first run through the data, applying the standard scientific approach to this sort of data. But we'll update this on an occasional basis, not every week, perhaps in 6 months or later as more data becomes available. Ultimately, the long-term plan is to move it to a production EPD where more animals have these values and they're updated every week.
We encourage producers to continue to send in data while Angus Genetics Incorporated works to create a production feet and leg EPD. The more data, the closer AGI comes to creating a production EPD. Visit angus.org/AGI to learn more about EPDs and genetic tools.
Traveling across huge expanses of rangeland, getting around on rocky terrain, grazing on a steep hillside, and running to the feed trough on a muddy, wet day. Strong foundations and skeletal structure are key ingredients for any successful commercial or registered operation. Texas Tech University's Ryan Rathman shares why feet and legs are a fundamental trait to cattle soundness and longevity.
Anytime that you start breeding livestock, the most fundamental trait is how the animals are put together. How are they built in their skeleton? It's generally a highly heritable trait, and so it's going to dictate, how long they're able to thrive in production, which is a key economic factor, obviously. And so cows don't necessarily have to be athletes, but they put a lot of weight on a small foot surface area. And in addition, they cover a lot of miles every day, obviously foraging. And so skeletal correctness is just a very basic fundamental selection item that producers have to know and understand and be able to select properly for. If I were to say, like I just did, that cattle producers have been selecting for this for decades or centuries, however far you want to go back, then you'd think, well, hey, by this time we've probably perfected it. But the case is that that's not the case. And producers constantly strive for a multi-trait selection process in which they're simultaneously trying to improve growth rate and maternal traits and carcass traits. And so it's one more piece of the pie. And so we're not single trait selecting the cattle. If we were, then maybe we wouldn't be having this discussion if all we selected for was skeletal correctness. But it's one of many that we've got to select for, so we can continually strive to improve on it.
Rathman was a speaker at 2017 Angus Convention. You can find more event coverage at angus.org. Visit angus.org/AGI to find more foot scoring information along with scoring charts.
Many agricultural stakeholders applauded the GOP tax plan when it was signed into law in December. But how is the newly enacted tax reform impacting the agriculture community? Christine Tidgren, an attorney at the Iowa State University Center for Agricultural Law and Taxation, shares how the legislation currently affects farmers and ranchers and what's to come.
The tax reform legislation has been very substantial. These changes for most individual provisions. So for most agricultural producers, livestock ranchers and things, they file their tax returns as individuals, and then all their business income flows through to their individual tax return. And those changes that were made under this law are only in effect through 2025, most of them. So most of them will expire come 2026 if Congress doesn't do anything else to act. Until that time, while these provisions are in place, most people should see their tax liability decrease, at least modestly, because of this new law. And that's really because of a couple of major things that the law has restructured. And the first one is the individual tax rates. Across the board, the law reduces the percentage for the various tax rates that people pay on an individual basis. A couple of other things have changed. Of particular importance to ag businesses is what we call the new 20% 199A deduction. Now, the law eliminated the old 199 deduction, which was called DPAD, but we have this new deduction called the 199A deduction, and it's very complicated, and we don't have all the explanations yet from IRS about how the law will be applied. But in general, it provides a method through which most producers will be able to deduct 20% of their net income with some limitations. And so that can provide a nice tax savings as well.
Visit your tax planner to find out how the tax reform will affect your operation and your family.
Mineral deficiency can impact growth, energy metabolism, and much more. University of Nebraska Beef Systems Specialist Mary Jurnowski is a big believer in sound mineral supplementation. We caught up with her to talk about key minerals for your herd, along with some common misconceptions producers have when it comes to supplementation.
When we think about mineral supplementation of our range cows, there's some key minerals that we tend to have deficiencies in. In particular, phosphorus can sometimes be deficient and sometimes not. It is one of the most expensive minerals to supplement, and so it's one of the key ones to evaluate on your ranch. And then when we think about other minerals, we have issues particularly with copper and zinc, and that we tend to have deficiencies in our herds. We want to look at providing a supplement that has enough copper and zinc in them, and we're really looking at providing at least their requirement for copper and probably half to 2/3 of their requirement for zinc. And then if we think about other minerals that we may need to consider supplementation of, iodine and cobalt are two that are usually not analyzed actually in our forages. And they're relatively cheap to provide in a supplement, and so we do tend to tell people to provide those. Both are involved in energy metabolism and growth. Iodine's very important for growth. So I would probably say the most common misconception is that animals eat their minerals based off of their requirements. And so if they're, for instance, a little bit deficient in copper, they'll go seek something that has copper in it. And in fact, they eat mineral supplements based off of palatability. Actually, they eat everything based off of palatability. They select things not based off of nutritional content, but based off of how it tastes to them. And so when we think about providing a supplement and looking at how much they're eating, we really need to gauge what's in the forage and then what do we need to provide, not looking at it from the standpoint of providing a bunch of options and saying, oh, they'll eat what they need, they'll do okay.
Jurnowski reminds producers that each mineral in a diet must be evaluated for amount, bioavailability of source, and possible interactions with other minerals. She was a featured speaker at the 2017 Range Beef Cow Symposium. Visit rangebeefcow.com for more event coverage.
When we return, we visit the 2017 Certified Angus Beef's Progressive Partner of the Year Award winners, Troy and Stacy Hadrick.
Then, Angus Sales TV is changing the way you look at sale catalogs. We'll tell you about the newest offering from Angus Media. Visit angus.media to continue watching this episode of The Angus Report.